समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया.
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
अब समझा.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Dhanush is a prime example where we exploited the transfer of technology. Bofors, in a manner in Kargil, proved that artillery remains the god of the war.
India has to come out of the lowest bidder mindset that anything that is cheap has to be good as well. I think is probably the idea here.
If you have to induct any weapon in US Army or the US military, it has to be battle tested in Ukraine.
Okay, so the Ukraine in that sense, actually that's a joke, by the way. You know that?
It's a test lab. Indigenization is the only way ahead. It takes time to start. You can't compare Elon Musk in space with a Chinese company.
A few weeks ago, I promised I'll be back with our men in uniform and their machines. Today, we will take a deep dive into Indian Army's guns. And here, I mean the artillery guns. By the way, for those of you who are new to defense equipment, please keep in mind that small arms such as pistols, rifles, or carbines are different from artillery guns. While we'll discuss small arms some other time, today the focus is on artillery, an essential force in modern warfare that actually win wars. You know, in Kargil war, we fired about 250,000 artillery rounds. By comparison, in the Russia-Ukraine war, each side has fired millions of rounds each and are still firing as we record the show. So today's worldview is where we will discuss India's lessons from Kargil, the need to have medium caliber, that is 155mm artillery guns that made us embark on a process of modernization, which we refer to as mediumization. That process has been a mixed bag. There have been accomplishments like the AATAGS, but also grave challenges and the need to catch up and realize the value of mounted artillery and wheeled and tracked versions as well. For the record, India doesn't yet have its own mounted artillery guns. We will also take a deep dive into lessons from the Russia-Ukraine war and the value of inducting drones in the artillery units. That has been a paradigm shift already. To take a deep dive into these pressing issues, I have with me Brigadier Anshuman Naang. Brigadier Narang is an alumni of the prestigious Rashtriya Indian Military College, the National Defence Academy, and the Defence Services Staff College. He holds the Adani Defence Chair of Excellence at St. Charles, and he is also the founder of an independent think tank, the Atmanirbhar Soch, which is successfully running courses on China's PLA and multi-domain operations. He's a keen China watcher and author of 3 books. He has attended courses at the American Artillery's Captain Career Course, Australian Joint Warfare Course, and the Japanese National Institute of Defence Studies course. He took voluntary retirement after commanding a prestigious composite artillery brigade of the Indian Army. He has been General Staff Officer GSO-1 of an independent armoured brigade, Colonel GS of an armoured division, instructor at the School of Artillery, and directing staff at Senior Command Wing, the Army War College. Very happy to have Brigadier Anshuman Naang here in the studio today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and from the introduction, of course, you know that he is just the right person to speak about guns and artillery guns, of course. He's been in the artillery himself. And today we all know that the key takeaways for us, especially from the Kargil era and the Kargil Review Committee, as well as after all these years, what we are seeing in the Russia-Ukraine war. I mean, artillery is still the god of warfare, isn't it? Purani
Yes.
baat hai, but it still holds, right?
It is. It remains the queen of the battle.
The queen of the battle, all right. So now we're trying to infuse a bit of feminism there. I'm very happy about it. The semantics matter.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's there. But I think if we really want to know where we are going when it comes to artillery, we need to understand where we are coming from. And for that, I think the best vantage point, of course, we can just keep going back to 1947 and what were the kind of guns and artillery systems that we were left with during the British era and the post-independence period, but that is not going to be very helpful. I think what in my mind could be a good vantage point to go ahead with this discussion is the Kargil War. Before I come and tell the viewers how many different types of artillery guns have we tried to, develop, where have we scored well, where have we missed, before that, first, the Kargil Wars and the role of the Bofors. Please tell us a little bit about that.
Bofors, in a manner, in Kargil, proved that artillery remains the god of the war. And the key fundamental difference is that when you're in high altitude, you're climbing such high peaks, you need to keep the enemy down.
Okay.
You need to keep his head down. And when his head needs to be kept down, when our infantry soldier, boots on the ground, which matter the most, they're showing their bravery and courage, you require something to ensure that the enemy is just hit. And that is where 155mm Bofors and all other guns together made the Indian artillery, made the Indian army and the Indian nation proud by pondering the enemy and making a great bit difference. There were times when which continuously the guns turned red, and when the barrel turns red, it was taking the gunners at a great strength and bravery to continue firing. It made a difference. And there was a continuous counter bombardment which was taking place. There were observation officers who were directing the fire with great courage. And you have people like Shashi Bhushan Galdial, Brigadier now in the Indian Army Artillery, getting Mahavir Chakra. So these things made a difference. It changed the way the war was fought.
But here, I think it makes a lot of sense because Anshuman is the right person to answer that. Why did we require, if you know that earlier we did not have Bofors, we kind of pulled Bofors from all different parts of where they were deployed in India and we sent them all to Kargil. What was the problem? Why did our 130mm guns that we earlier had not really play the role that Bofors, which are 155mm, played?
It will be incorrect that 130mm did not play a role. 130mm played a role.
Okay.
But the kind of high angle fire which is required, the range which gets enhanced, and when counter bombardment takes place, Bofors had its own little bit of mobility.
Right.
In mountains to be able to move from one place to the other, Bofors was a better choice than 130mm.
Okay.
The speed of fire which could be achieved with Bofors was better. But 130mm was rugged. I've been since childhood a 130mm gunner. So that part aside, a steady system. But Bofors got that variety, the kind of ammunition variety. It made a difference and the rate of fire was very, very important.
And that also, I think at this point, the viewers should know that when we are talking about guns, usually in artillery, we are referring to three kinds of guns. There are field guns, there are medium guns, and there are heavy guns. So if the caliber is less than 130mm, we call it a field gun. If the caliber is between 130mm to 160mm, we call it a medium gun, which is the prime example is that of Bofors. And if the caliber is more than 160mm, we call it heavy. So heavy are now obsolete, of course. Now, most of the endeavors of the Indian Army today are about, achieving that standardization of the 155mm gun. So we are going to definitely talk about that. But before I go further, and this is now where we require your expert insights, how do we get into this classification? Of course, field, medium and heavy on the one hand, but then there are also self-propelled guns. Then there are also rockets, Pinakas, there's also BrahMos. So before we get into the details of the mediumization and the plans we sort of embarked upon, then a little bit of this classification.
Okay.
How would you help the audience understand that?
Guns are the basic trajectory.
Yeah.
Absolute basic trajectory. And you have the normal propellant getting the projectile out.
Right.
So that's basic. Now, the difference between field and medium comes is when, those old days when you wanted close support.
Right.
So when that infantry soldier assaulted, right till the last minute, he was going to attack, he was going to assault, you required support.
Okay.
And that close support by field, since the caliber was less, the danger distances, the safety distances, you could go closer.
Okay.
So that is by field. Whereas in the medium, the caliber being high, the lethality being more, the safety distance required was a bit more.
Yeah.
So you required a combination of medium and field both.
Right.
So till a particular distance, medium with a better caliber caused more destruction. So you required. Now coming down to rockets. Rockets have a different way of fire. There's a powered phase in it of firing.
Yeah.
So rockets had a lot of dispersion.
Right.
But the destruction caused, you must look at a Smerch video, and the kind of destruction Smerch 300 rocket causes or Pinaka causes is significant. But they have a lot of dispersion. The safety distances go quite high. I mean, anything up even kilometer to sometimes. So in that case, what you do, the rockets are used to soften the target much before the assault is going to start.
Right.
It's kind of a preparatory bombardment.
Yeah.
And missiles are different. They're ballistic and cruise missiles, which have a different trajectory altogether. And yes, with the cruise missiles and others, we have changed the way precision is thought about.
Absolutely.
And the destruction cost undoubtedly is much, much more, but the cost difference is phenomenally high.
Absolutely, yes. I'm glad you mentioned, because I think the viewers need to understand that when we are talking about artillery guns, we do talk about guns and rockets. The key takeaway here, if I'm not wrong, Anshuman, is that they don't substitute for each other, they complement each other. Okay, so artillery has a different function out there, and the the rockets, they have a different function because they are looking at saturation of that area target, like
Absolutely.
you said. Okay, and we are going to talk a little bit more about that, because how do we have a discussion on artillery guns and rockets without discussing Pinakas? But it'll come a little later. But for now, I also want a little bit of clarity from you on what is the difference between, for example, towed and mounted artillery. Because so far, even our best bet, which is the AATAGS, and we are going to talk about that in a bit of in a few minutes. But then the towed and the mounted guns.
Okay. Now, please understand, the word towed is mean that the gun is different and it's being towed by a tractor, a field artillery tractor.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I mean, the gun and the vehicle towing it are two different platforms.
Right.
Mounted is where the gun itself is mounted on the platform, which is the mobility platform. A better word than mounted is self-propelled.
Okay.
Now, self-propelled has two varieties. The tracked, which is the Vajra, the K9 Vajra, and the wheeled. Wheeled is something like the Chinese have inducted called a PCL 181.
Okay.
It's self-propelled, wheeled. So, tracked is where it can go in any terrain, but yes, it disrupts the road. So, in areas like mountains and others, you can't have tracked vehicles which can move on the roads.
Right.
So, you have wheeled.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have to use word mounted, I will say a better version is self-propelled. And self-propelled is in two parts, wheeled and tracked.
Okay. Okay. Now that's a very important thing to know. And now when we have a basic information on what kind of different artillery guns are there, what are rockets, how do they differ, what is the difference between towed artillery and mounted artillery, etc. I think now perhaps is the right time to get into how India embarked upon the modernization of its artillery, which in technical terms is called mediumization. And this mediumization is coming from that word I used when I said field, medium and heavy. So because the medium range, which was between 130 to 160 and ideal being 155, was, had fared so well for us in the Kargil wars. So the idea was to then develop, based on the Bofors, which of course came much earlier, based on that to then get into indigenized versions and, all that for that 155 artillery gun. And then we will ask Brigadier Anshuman to give us a bit of an overview. So from Bofors, when we wanted to mediumize and also standardize that 155mm artillery guns, what were the challenges that we faced? Because there's not been one, but several variants that we landed up, developing.
See, the issue is 155mm provides the required destruction at the target end, at the adversary end, what you want.
It's most efficient in that
It's
sense.
most efficient.
Yeah.
Second issue is, as I brought out earlier, 105mm, yes, they were there, but the destruction was less. the quantum you thereafter need to fire is much more, whereas lesser number of 155 rounds will achieve much more than what you would have achieved with a 105 round.
Okay.
So, firing, the cost, and so many other things, overall it comes to more economical use. But
Right.
the con, when you get to a 155 finally a gun can be as long, it can't be unlimited long.
True.
And the range gets enhanced by the length.
Right.
So when you enhance the range, you automatically land up increasing the weight.
Correct.
And the way it is in mountains, which is now, we have to keep the northern adversary in mind. Mountains, you can't have heavy loads going.
True.
So you could not have any guns which are more than 20 tons.
Right. Maneuverability has to be nimble, footed in many ways. Yeah.
So with that in mind, there were challenges of how you get a gun
Okay.
which can get onto the bad roads in mountains. Roads get disrupted, and climate. The soil, particularly in the area of Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, is absolutely soft.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Chinese roads keep coming off.
Mm-hmm.
So that itself is a challenge. And in such roads, to get a gun which is large,
Yeah.
can turn on a particular road bend of
Yeah.
those mountains is a
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah.
So those are the issues which we faced, and as also the importance of range.
True.
It is only with a medium that you get a longer range.
Right. Yeah. So just for the viewers, so when we started with this mediumization, because from what Brigadier Anshuman just explained as to why is it, the most optimal and efficient thing to have. So we first tried to upgrade our earlier 130 MMs, and for those we turned to Israel and we got the Soltam, kits. From there, basically the idea, if I'm not wrong, was to remove the 130 and then to replace it with 155
You
But
keep
they-
the basic
the
platform the
was
same.
the same, but it made it very heavy. So the Soltam, of course, didn't really work very well. It was a bit of a jugaad, frankly, not really a solution. And then, but help me understand a bit on Dhanush, because a lot of people don't know, especially the conversation that we usually tend to have on artillery guns. From Bofors, we suddenly come to AATAGS when we're talking about, what the Indian journey has been. What about Dhanush? Dhanush are referred to as Desi Bofors. So, give us a story of that.
Dhanush is a prime example where we exploited the transfer of technology.
Correct. Yes.
So the Bofors technology was there.
Yeah.
That was 39 calibers. Caliber here, don't get confused with the Kutra. Kutra is 155.
Yeah.
But the length of the barrel was 39 times of that.
Yeah.
And we wanted it more because that's how you enhance the range.
Yeah.
So Dhanush is an upgraded version of Bofors, moving from 39 calibers to 45.
Yeah.
And yes, there have been hiccups, but today I will say it's a success story.
Yeah. Okay.
So we moved ahead on it.
So the interesting bit out there is that when I was researching for it and I spoke to so many people from the RT party, as I'm sure the Fauji's there would know what it is. But so the story was that when we bought the Bofors, right, which is right back in the late 80s, we got the transfer of technology and it was lying somewhere in some old forgotten file. And suddenly we kind of realized that we have the TOT with us, and why not we embark upon making our own Desi version of Bofors? And that's what he's saying. That's how Dhanush was born. And Dhanush has worked well in many ways, right?
It is working well,
Yeah.
and we'll see a lot more of it coming soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but then even for Dhanush, so now we know, so from Soltam kits to Dhanush, but then there's also a third version.
Soltam kits to Sarang.
So that's what I was going to ask. So the third indigenization effort that we did was Sarang, isn't it? And this is a Soltam upgrade, that instead of then trying to get it from the Israelis, we try to indigenize that bit, isn't it? That's
See,
how
the
Sarang was born.
Magic mantra is modernization through indigenization.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if you have to modernize through indigenization,
Huh.
there were some problems. It's not Soltam succeeded, but there were some problems with the way dealership and so many other issues.
Mhm.
And let's not get it. We found it was again a transfer of technology, and our own indigenous factories stood up to it and are now producing Sarang.
Okay.
So that's again 130 upgradation to 155 and we are getting more variety of 155 with us.
Yeah, right. Although I will have a question on that as to why do we have so many different varieties of the same 155 but I'm going to ask you later. But as far as, so now you understand, so from Salton to Sarang, which is, one foreign and then one more indigenized, and then we had our own Dhanush. But then we also wanted more quantities, didn't we?
Absolutely.
All of this still did not cater to the quantities required by the Indian Army. By the way, you know that Indian Army has about 350 regiments of
Yes.
artillery, and the quantities that you require, it's pretty huge. So then, because we wanted more quantities, then we moved to something, especially in the realm of Arunachal Pradesh and these areas where we wanted to move one artillery gun from one valley to another. Perhaps is that the reason why we went for the ultralight howitzers from the US?
See, as I brought out, the issue is when a gun becomes heavy, you can't move it in mountains.
Right.
Mountains, thanks to Gati Shakti, our roads are changing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a phenomenal success. So now slowly we will be able to get our guns up.
Okay.
But till the time you could not move, and you talked about Arunachal Pradesh, those valleys which are there, Siang, Siom and others. So it was a challenge to move.
Yeah.
And hence you required something lighter which could move there. And that is why ultralight howitzer, which
Yeah.
was inducted.
Yeah, as per the name, because they are ultra light and they can be underslung on a Chinhu helicopter, and they can be sort of flown air there. And we bought, I think, initially about 200 pieces of ultralight howitzers, and perhaps you're looking for more. I'm not sure about that. You would be the right person. So this is something that we bought from the US. But then comes probably the most satisfying upgrade, or the most satisfying innovation till date that we have in our indigenous artillery gun system, which are the AATAGS, which are advanced towed military artillery guns. Now, of course, you're going to be telling me about why the AATAGs are considered so advanced. But my follow-up question would be that if they are so good, if there are also private players involved in it, right? I mean, the Tatas and Kalyanis. Why is it that even right now, out of the 350 regiments of the Indian Army, there's only one regiment that has AATAGs? Help me understand. This is just so counterintuitive.
See, as far as the guns are concerned, they've been successfully tried.
Yes, yeah.
And they've been successfully tried 2 to 3 times.
Yeah. They're developed by DRDO, by the way. Yeah.
They're developed by ARD and DRDO, and in conjunction with, of course, Baba Kalyani and Tatas.
Tatas, yes.
So the orders have been placed. There were a lot of contractual issues of the cost. Finally the cost has to be made. But presumably there was some problems with the towed tractor.
Okay.
That has been resolved, and the 307 guns is all known. It's in the open domain, well known. So those 307 pieces should be coming at great speed now.
Okay. But does it also have to do with the fact that, though we will come to Russia-Ukraine war, of course, we're going to be talking about that in details, but is it also got to do with the fact that Russia-Ukraine war has shown that perhaps more than the towed artillery systems, we want mounted artillery systems, because it gives you better maneuverability in terms of shoot and scoot, so that you can shoot, although the towed guns will take longer. Do you think that is also a consideration that we are having in mind, or the Indian Army is having in mind?
Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly, yes, that is a consideration, and very rightfully brought out by you. But the issue is, those kind of plains and desert exist against a different adversary.
Right.
And mountains is a different ball game. And as I get back to again and again, the point is of the maneuverability in mountains. You see the PLA, and you can see some photographs of theirs. They are picking up, Chinese are making bunkers from whether it is their PCL-191, the wheeled versions of self-propelled, or the PHL-03s, those are the rockets.
Yeah.
They get inside a bunker, come outside, fire, get back inside that tunnel.
Yeah.
So mountains, the way you're going to employ is absolutely different. And the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 catchy phrases. If you're still, you're bound to die.
Yeah.
Detection equals destruction.
Yeah.
So that is why the shoot to scoot and shoot and scoot is very, very important, because you have to survive to be able to strike, and you cannot stay at one place for long. And hence the maneuverability and that kind of innovation to apply from a plain scenario of a Russia-Ukraine war to a mountain scenario is a challenge.
Challenge.
And yes, Indian artillery will live up to it and come out successful on it.
Yeah, because that's the whole idea. The whole idea is to basically look at Russia-Ukraine war as a live laboratory of what is working, what is not working, what can work for us,
Absolutely.
etc. The whole world is actually, into that learning process. But we are going to talk about that. However, before I come to the second part, which is on the Russia-Ukraine war, and Anshuman has done some wonderful, wonderful work on it. But I have to still ask you about another star performer of the Indian Army, which is the K9 Vajra self-propelled artillery guns that we first got from South Korea, and then to enhance the indigenized content there, the IC there, L&T started to sort of get the knockdown kits and assemble it here, and so we have the K9 Vajras, and the Indian Army is very happy with it. But nonetheless, please tell us, where does now the K9 Vajra stand in this entire discussion?
It is another success story.
Okay.
It is a wonderful weapon system.
Okay.
And has succeeded quite a lot. You need to look at the way it is used for firing, the maneuverability, and the destruction effect. It's wonderful.
Okay.
And that is why with that success, there's been another order, and we're all aware the quantum it is coming into.
Yeah.
So Indian Army, that is why you're not putting all eggs in one basket. You're having another variety, and it's been inducted to the mountains where it is required to be.
True. Yeah.
And it's doing a fantastic job there too.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, if I'm not wrong, is that also when you look at the T90s, right? For the T90 tanks, you need something like the K9, for their artillery.
See, the matching maneuverability.
Matching maneuverability.
With whether it is plains or the mountains, K9 supplements the armored component, the mechanized component. It very well complements.
Yeah. Before we had the K9s for it, by the way, we were actually still reliant on the British era Abbots, if I'm not wrong.
Catapults.
Okay, the catapults. And then now we have this. So the
Abbots was initial, and then we moved to the catapults.
Right. So between the Abbots and the K9, we had catapults as well. So that is the purpose of having an expert here who can actually fine-tune the conversation to something which was really going to have a lasting impact. Right. And now very quickly, since we talked a little bit in the introductions about the rockets, but now a little bit about, and we know, I mean, we did discuss how rockets and artillery guns complement each other, but we still have to talk about this beauty called Pinakas, right?
A Pinaka is, as of now, a 214 mm rocket.
Yeah.
But the best part is the versatility.
Okay.
You can change the pod.
Okay.
Unlike Smirch, which is restricted to a particular tube, it provides you the versatility of using another pod. So whether from 214 mm you put a 300 mm or you enhance it is a pod system based.
Okay.
And the accuracy is
phenomenal.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
The speed is phenomenal. The shoot and scoot, you must look, comes out of a tunnel and it causes a lot of trouble for the enemy. It's purely indigenous system and excellent one at it. Whether it's the ammunition, the platform, completely indigenous.
That's very important because there is some confusion sometimes that some people ask me that are the Pinakas a kind of an upgrade of the BM-21? That's not true. Pinakas are completely indigenous. There are fundamental difference in how these two systems have been developed. And I guess Pinakas got first in news when we learned that Armenia has been placing, massive orders for it. And now, of course, our own Indian Army has also placed orders for Pinakas. But not just that, the French are also interested in Pinakas. Perhaps they're longer range. And I did write a column on that. I said the French Pinaka affair. I don't know where it's going, but yes.
The French chief visit in looking at Pinaka, you can have a look. The Eastern Command tweeted on it.
Yes.
And he was mighty happy with the Pinaka performance.
Yeah. They are. So yes, I mean, so this is perhaps a kind of an overview of what really has been India's, journey, what have been our challenges, what have been our successes. But yes, I still would like to ask you one thing before we move on to the Russia-Ukraine war, is that why the private players have not been very successful in terms of partnering. I mean, we do talk about these successes. I mean, we talked about Kalyani, we talked about Tatas, but we don't really see a major part of that privatization happening. Where do you see is the problem? It's been so long. I mean, Kargil Review Committee came years ago, and then why do you think, where is the problem?
Indigenization is the only way ahead. It takes time to start. You can't compare Elon Musk in space with a Chinese company.
Yeah.
So I'll just give you a broad example. You'll talk about Elon Musk with so many satellites, 2,000 plus satellites being launched in a year, and the Chinese struggling to even produce 50 satellites in a year of that same variety.
Correct.
And now you compare our economy. So that was just a broad example. Whether it is Pinaka, there are two firms, Tata and L&T involved.
Yeah.
Whether it is AATAGS, there are 2 and 3 firms involved.
Yeah.
And then you have Dhanush, and then you have others. So our indigenous firms are coming up. It takes artillery is not a simple thing. It requires complete metallurgy machines to be built up.
True.
And that requires a lot of infrastructure. It requires a lot of expenditure. And the government is coming ahead in helping them,
Right.
to start our own factory with the kind of machines to build such complex barrels and tubes requires a lot of work. And the work is on, and that is why you're seeing the results now. A process which started in 2010 and you're in 2025.
Right.
See the number of Pinakas which are changing. AATAGS, which you pointed out, 1, and see 2 years later where will we? Dhanush, where will we be? So from 2010 to 2025, we have come a lot way ahead.
Yeah.
And personally, my opinion is, come what may, indigenize.
Yeah.
We will get delayed. There will be struggles, but we will come out more and more successful. Our civil industry needs to be strengthened,
Yeah.
and the bonhomie between the civil, military, and the government is
Yeah.
what will get us ahead.
And the thing is that all this sounds extremely easy when we are talking about it, but to achieve it in reality is where the real challenge is. And the
Exactly.
purpose of having this discussion is also to try and identify what really are the gaps, so that this synergy can be created in a manner that can give us results in the most efficient manner.
From the challenges which are required,
Right.
from the civil industry point of view, you speak to any startup, they require the hand-holding.
Right.
They require the support. They require assured orders. They say that no cost, no commitment trials for them are sourcing on their funds.
Yeah. True.
So
Yeah.
they require the support.
Yeah.
Whereas from the government, they don't want to go outside. They want to completely indigenize.
Yeah.
And you can't be tied to one dealer.
Yeah.
You have to have. Then there is, of course, the challenge of L1, the procedures, and the government is coming out with those procedures of coming out of L1.
Yeah.
So with-
L1, I think,
is
for
the lowest
viewers, the
bidder.
lowest bidder. Okay, so India has to come out of the lowest bidder mindset that anything that is cheap has to be good as well. I think is probably
Absolutely.
the idea here.
Then you have to also ensure that there is no outside component. You see how Ukrainians suffered because of Chinese components in their drones. So with all those issues involved,
Yeah.
it's not so easy, and
Yeah.
we are learning up
Yeah.
lessons and pacing up.
So, of course, I mean, and I think now we have the entire stage set for now coming to a live war, which is being, being fought for the last 3 years. In fact, in a few days, it will now enter its 4th year, which is the grinding war of attrition, the Russia-Ukraine war, which has, in my opinion, given us a few learnings early on. A, the battlefield is changing. B, unlike what everybody thought about how modern wars are going to be, it has kind of refuted all those theories that modern wars are going to be swift, modern wars are going to be precise, they're going to be short. I think modern wars can be grinding wars of attrition. We saw a return of trench warfare. We saw a return of tanks. Everybody was writing off tanks, and now we say, no, we can't do without tanks. Then about artillery, like we said, if it is a god or a queen or whatever, the point is it's indispensable. And one of the things which is very, very unique about the Russia-Ukraine war is that you may have heard hundreds of times by now that Ukraine has been outgunned. Ukraine has been outgunned. And both the sides are firing millions and millions of rounds of artillery. Russians are firing 122 mm mainly. Ukrainians are firing both 122 mm, which are Soviet era, and Russian standard, and the 155 mm, which is NATO standard. And because there has been a crippling shortage of sending these munitions to Ukraine, Ukraine has been forced to then innovate with tactical improvements, and this has been the reason why they have been so good with drones. So there's this wonderful, in terms of how wars are fought and how modern wars are being fought, we see that because there has been a shortage has led Ukraine to then innovate. So the combination not only of artillery, guns and their ammunition, but also how this has led to an innovation, and what frankly can India then learn from this? Long question, but then I expect a long answer as well.
The shortest answer to it, don't be buyers, be innovators.
Don't be biased, be innovators. Okay.
So that is how the Ukrainians have moved ahead. When they required a quantum of 20,000 artillery shells to be fired every day across the 300 artillery pieces they had, different kinds of various countries. They succeeded on the best of the day with good foreign support, about 9,000 rounds.
Yeah.
And actually, every day, when what on their own they could get is about 2,000 rounds. Now, those 2,000 rounds versus 20,000 rounds, how do they overcome?
Correct.
So then they had those Ukrainian civilians,
Yeah.
sitting gaming expert civilians, flying their drones. And those racing drones were converted into what are today called the first person view drones.
FPV drones. Yeah.
FPV drones.
Yeah.
See a normal video, a child delivers through an FPV drone a coffee to parents who are boating on a lake. So FPV gets to deliver what you want at the right place. It gives you immersive, the pilot is looking exactly where the drone is flying. So that's changed the way of precision.
Mhm.
They've come up with a concept called tactical reconnaissance strike complexes.
Okay.
Now, FPV drone with the artillery munition together and motor ammunition has changed the tactical battlefield.
Okay.
जो हम कहते थे एक सेक्शन कमांडर का तोप खाना, प्लेटून कमांडर का तोप खाना. A section commander and a platoon commander has something up his own sleeve. He gets the drone up, flies it, and it hits. When our Chief of Army Staff, Indian Chief of Army Staff says, every soldier, one drone each, it makes sense. Because that's changed the battlefield completely.
And now there's no getting back. I think what is more important to understand is that now there's no getting back, from there, because it's not just us, but it's also our adversaries, the arch rivals that are learning the same lessons. In fact, I must tell everybody here something very important that I also shared in my internal assessments with the Indian Air Force, which was that, why is it that the Chinese are supporting Russians? The fact is not just about sort of, putting up this combined fight against the US. No, that's a very, very obvious thing. The real thing out there, Anshuman, is that they are actually getting all the information of how the Western weapons are performing in the real battlefield. Okay, and that sensitive information. So it's not just us, it's everybody that are taking these lessons. And if we do not improvise in time, we are going to be in a problem. So this is already a paradigm shift from where we probably can't go back, and we have to keep going forward with it.
For the Americans, in the Defense Ministry,
Yeah.
it is a known fact now that if you have to induct any weapon in US Army or the US military, it has to be battle tested in Ukraine.
Okay, so the Ukraine in that sense, actually that's a joke, by the way. You know that?
It's a test lab.
No, what I'm saying is that it's now become a joke. So for example, now the Ukrainians, a lot of times they joke about it and they say that when you say that the ISO 2001 and 9001, you say that now it's not just made somewhere, it's like it's tested in Ukraine. And actually that's a standard for the Americans. Very interesting, yeah.
So with that kind of a battle testing happening of the latest technology,
Yeah.
and the technology incubation cycle has changed.
Come
It's
here.
not years and years, it
Yeah.
is into weeks.
Yeah.
Every technology is being tested. And something like when we started the war, you talked about electronic warfare,
Yeah.
and it was with the specialist. Today, another catchy phrase is fixed frequency electronic warfare is dead,
Okay. Yeah.
which means you can't be on one frequency. So with that kind of a shift in the warfare technology, and the Chinese are part of it.
Yeah.
Their drones are flying, they're assisting the Russians with a lot of stuff. The North Koreans are there. So there are a lot of lessons being picked up. And Chinese organizationally, technically, technologically, and strategically are incorporating those lessons.
Yeah.
When a missile fails, what has happened? When their drone fails, what has happened? When EW, and every day, if you follow the Chinese media, the propaganda video will come immediately. You can have a look at some of those videos. It's daily. FPV is there. They're coming up with their own FPV modifications, how things have to be used, how EW has to be undertaken. So a lot of lessons.
Yeah, but despite that, I mean, this is something like a generic statement now in every other conversation that is happening at every other channel, platform, anywhere, you would see that, oh yeah, drone warfare is the key takeaway. But you being the specialist, could you also help the viewers and also me understand a little better, how does this really play out in a battlefield? Let's say the Ukrainians are there in a scenario and they're completely outgunned. And what exactly does the drone do? And it's just the FPVs or different kinds?
Okay. Now, the Ukrainians are at most of the cases manpower adverse ratio of 1:10.
Yeah.
First, what the drones have been able to do is to withstand the assaults.
Yeah.
And if the reports are correct, they have undertaken a first completely unmanned assault.
Yeah.
There was no manpower. It was completely an unmanned assault with those unmanned ground vehicles and robos together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what it has changed is, I'll just give you an example of assault when we relate it to artillery. In the last 300 meters, when you require that artillery firepower support,
Right.
these drones are the ones which have provided the support.
Okay.
They don't require any safety. The precision is enhanced. You look at a video, there is a tank which is moving and a drone which is chasing that tank.
Okay.
The first drone hits, it gets to a tank to a mobility kill.
Yeah,
It stops the mobility.
Yeah.
Then another drone follows up and it hits inside. It becomes a K kill. The tank completely goes off. So a double blow. Now it is not just the FPV drone. It is a combination of long range drones which got tested. Bakhtiar UAVs got tested earlier. Then they moved on.
Bakhtiyars are Turkish, by the way.
But they are Turkish. Then they came up with their own, like the Russians responded with the Iranian Shahid 136.
Shahid 136.
And then now 147 has come. And Russians have come up with their own Oran modified Shahid 136.
Yeah.
So there are whole set. Then the Ukrainians have modified something called the Baba Yaga drones.
Yeah, Baba Yaga drones.
They are the bombers.
That's right. Yeah, bombers.
So imagine bombers and normal drones being used together. So it has changed the battle space geometry. Combat, dispersion and trench warfare is back.
Yeah.
You can't be concentrating together, have long tank convoys, have long logistic convoys. The drones are going to detect you, and the kill chain cycle has got converted into a kill web. Kill chain required detection, acquisition, tracking, engagement. Now that detection, tracking is both being done together and thereafter engagement. And then the artillery is there to support you in conjunction with the drone and with the conventional munition getting more precise with the exact correction which is required.
Right. So this is completely, like, for example, now what we understand is completely changed the rules of engagement of how wars are being fought and how will they be fought in the future. So we better be prepared. But very quickly, now coming back and trying to kind of circle it back to the Indian experience, what kind of changes do we need to do? Because yes, we are infamous for procurement cycles that take 20 years, 30 years.
You see, first issue is a concept called multi-domain precision strikes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Now, you saw what Iran did with Israel, and Israel responded back in kind. Or closer home, what Pakistan did with Iran, or Iran did with Pakistan, and Pakistan did with Afghanistan.
Right.
Or China has done with Taiwan on 4th August 2020. So this is a concept of multi-domain precision strike, which is in the escalation ladder, not leading to a hot war. You're prepared for strikes. We had our own Uri and Balakot, we are well aware of. So what needs to be done is you need to have all kinds of precision weapons coming in together to be able to undertake long-range precision strikes.
Okay.
That's the first issue.
Okay.
Now that leads to the next part, is how is that going to change? You saw, and the Americans provide the HIMARS system, the high mobility rocket system.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, rocket systems which are able to fire rockets and missiles both. That is the requirement. You have Pralay, which is firing the missiles, and you have Pinaka, which is firing the rockets. Now, if Pinaka and Pralay are combined, that gives much better, and you are able to beat Chinese in the game of PCL 191. PCL 191 of the Chinese fires 300 mm, something Smirch equivalent, 370 mm, 650 mm, and 700 mm, going from a range of 100 kilometers to 500 kilometers. And they have made it a long-range artillery brigade. Now, incorporate the same and learn the lesson that integrated with your own runway independent RPAs, integrated with the drones, you get a recce strike complex. Next, get down the MBRL and the rockets to the lowest level possible. Brigades, get a battery down. You see the Russian brigade battalion tactical groups. They had these 122 MBRL batteries integrated.
Yeah.
The Chinese have made it as an integral component of their brigades.
Yeah.
Each brigade has a 122 battery.
Yeah.
We need to get our own Pinakas in larger quantity and give
To
it
be
down to the
integrated.
brigades.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with Pinakas having a variety to be able to fire the missiles when required.
Yeah. So ultimately, yeah, that it is. So in simple terms, of course, only a specialist can sort of break it down into the kind of components that we really need to be focusing on. In the end, I think the question is about interoperability, trying to keep the supply chains efficient and yet diversified, trying to also learn from what is being fought in the world today, and then trying to put all of this together. So try to, also have a kind of a synergy that we perhaps sometimes, seem to not have. So this is about trying to get into a different mindset.
In the era of contested logistics, your logistics columns are going to be continuously targeted. You need to have combat sustenance. And combat sustenance, for years, as you pointed out rightly in the starting, everyone had been looking for short wars. You're now looking for such long wars. Now, is it going to be economically cost benefit to be prepared for 3 years long war, 4 years long war? Does the government have? No. So then the next issue comes is to be prepared for a surge. So you enhance your own capacities, you export, and then you have the capacity to surge. So as we are opening up and we are outsourcing as much of our ammunition capacities, and very rightly being done by the government and the Indian Army, we need to outsource as much, get our civilian indigenous industries strengthened, and have that if war takes place, we have the capacity to surge.
On that note, I'll just reiterate that is the reason why today, when you talk about the military thought, you cannot really go far if you don't really get the component of the civil-military fusion right. The point of the private sector, making it more competitive, trying to change the mindset, trying to make it more efficient, etc., etc. But that was such a wonderful discussion with you, Brigadier Anshuman Naang. It was an honor to have you here, to have you speak to the audiences directly. I mean, you of course know that he's just the right kind of person, but I must tell you right away in front of the audience that we are going to have you back again, because this is something that requires more discussion. And I think the next time when you come, we're going to be talking more about, for example, this entire supply chain of the 155mm shells and how this has been the game spoiler or a game changer, whichever way you want to call it. But then on that note, let me thank you once again. It was such a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. If I may have my closing statement, I'll just say Atmanirbharta is actually required, and that whole of nation approach is absolutely defined. Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, Jai Anusandhan.
That was the most wonderful way to end the show. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So that was an insightful discussion. There is no substitute for self-reliance, right? India has to put together a whole of government approach, a civil-military fusion to create the right synergy. We need to scale our productions and inductions because Indian Army has about 350 artillery regiments and time here is a factor. From the Russia-Ukraine war, we have learned the value of what is tested in Ukraine, and that is now becoming a standard for the US Army acquisitions, and the value of drones that made Ukraine survive the war for this long, a phrase that is best expressed as communitization of their war efforts. Warfare is moving towards multi-domain precision strikes, and the kill chain is now reduced to a kill web, highlighting the complexity of today's battlefield. That was the Arty Party today at ThePrint Worldview with Swasti. As I promised, I'm going to be back again to discuss more machines and all the heavily debated ideas that we need to modernize and ultimately win wars with. Until then, stay tuned.